My father's hands were once the thing I admired most. Large, calloused, able to turn rough timber into art. He was a gifted carpenter. But after my mother died, those same hands became my nightmare, violating me in the darkness of his own bedroom. And when I was 13 years old, in his own workshop, I put an end to that nightmare with the roar of a machine and a scream I will never forget. This is my story. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they shake your beliefs. There are stories that, no matter how painful, are on the border with Illinois. It was a small, pretty town where everybody knew everybody, a pretty place, with those colorful little houses and the Ohio River snaking alongside, separating Kentucky and Illinois. My father, Arthur Peterson, worked as a carpenter. He had his own workshop in the back of our house. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders and large, calloused hands from working with wood. My mother, Genevieve, was a fine seamstress. She made wedding dresses that were sought after by girls from other towns. Our house was simple, but always tidy. It had a long hallway that connected the living room to the 3 bedrooms. Mine was small, with a window that looked out onto the backyard. Mom had put up floral wallpaper that she picked out herself. I loved to count the flowers while waiting for sleep to come. There was a large backyard with a peach tree that bore fruit so sweet the smell would spread through the whole neighborhood when they were ripe. We were an ordinary family for that time. Dad worked all day in the workshop. Mom sewed and took care of the house. And my brother Ethan, 2 years older than me, and I would walk to school together in the morning. Ethan was always the protector, holding my hand on the gravel roads and defending me when any of the boys picked on me. Our routine was simple and predictable. We woke up early, had breakfast with homemade biscuits and strawberry jam that Mom made, then we went to school. At lunch, we all ate together at the table. Dad made a point of this family time. "It's over bread and at the table that you know a man's character," he always said. In the afternoon, we played in the backyard or helped with house chores. Ethan liked to be in the workshop with Dad, learning the trade. I preferred to stay near Mom, watching her sew, her delicate fingers guiding the fabric under the machine's needle. On Sunday afternoons, we'd walk through the town square. Dad would buy us an ice cream cone, and we'd watch the people, the families strolling, the young couples. Mom always wore a pretty dress on those days, usually a light blue one, which Dad said matched her eyes, and they would walk hand in hand like 2 sweethearts. In those moments, I thought we were the happiest family in the world. I had my school friends, Hannah and Emily. We played ring around the rosy, house, and school. Hannah lived just across the street and would sometimes sleep over when her parents went to run errands in the next town. We made forts with sheets draped over chairs and told scary stories with a flashlight under our faces. Life was simple, but good. Until I was 10, my biggest worry was whether it would rain on the day of the school field trip or if there'd be a piece of the apple pie Mom made on Saturdays left for me. But fate has a way of changing everything when we least expect it. It started with a cough that Mom couldn't control. At first, she said it was nothing, just a silly little cold. But soon she started losing weight, getting more tired. The sewing started to take longer. Some clients had to find another seamstress because Mom couldn't keep up. I remember Dad would get nervous about it. "Genevieve, you need to go to the doctor," he'd say. But back then, going to the doctor was almost a luxury, only when things were really bad. And when she finally went, it was already too late. Tuberculosis, they said. Back then, they didn't have the treatments they have today. And Mom, always so full of life, withered away in front of us like a little flower without water. The day she left us, the sky was so blue it seemed like a taunt. How could it be so beautiful outside when inside our house there was only pain? I had just turned 11. Ethan was 13. Dad was like an empty shell, sitting on the edge of the bed where Mom had passed, staring at his hands as if looking for an answer in them. When grief hollows a good man out, what rushes in to fill that void? This moment of profound loss was the crack that allowed the darkness to seep in. For Naomi and Ethan, the silence in their home was about to be filled by something far worse than just sorrow. The funeral was simple, but the whole town showed up. Mom was loved by everyone. They formed a line to give us their condolences, and all I could think was that I wanted everyone to go away, to leave me alone with my pain. Ethan stayed tough, holding back his tears, but I saw him when he hid behind the shed and cried until he sobbed. We went home, and the silence was like a living presence. Dad didn't say anything, but he started drinking more. He'd always had his little drink after work, but now it was different. He drank late into the night. Sometimes he'd fall asleep right in the living room. The workshop started getting fewer orders because he wasn't meeting deadlines. Money got tight, and so did his patience. Ethan tried to help as he could. He learned to cook some basic things. He looked after me when Dad was indisposed, but he was just a boy himself. And soon, things got much worse for us. It was a week after the funeral. I couldn't sleep in my room alone. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought I would hear Mom's cough from the next room. And when I remembered I'd never hear it again, the tears would come. That night, it was especially hard. The wind was rattling the window, making a strange noise, like someone was scratching to get in. I got out of bed and went to Ethan's room, but he wasn't there. I found out later he had gone to sleep at our Uncle Frank's house to help with some work on the farm the next day. I stood in the dark hallway, afraid to go back to my room, but even more afraid to stay there. That's when Dad's bedroom door opened. He was standing there, his silhouette cut out by the faint light of the lamp he kept lit. "Naomi, what is it, girl? Can't sleep?" he asked. His voice was different, thicker from the drinking. I shook my head, holding back a sob. "You miss your mom, don't you?" "Me too," he said. And then he made the invitation that would change everything. "Come, sleep here with Dad tonight. That way, neither of us will be alone." That night, something in his eyes should have warned me. But I was just a girl with a broken heart from losing her mother. How could I have known what that invitation really meant? How could I have imagined that by lying down in that bed, I was stepping into a cage I wouldn't escape from for years? Oh, my dears, this 3-year-old woman looks back, and I just wish I could go back and hold that 1-year-old girl. When the pain of losing a mother is that raw, a child will cling to any promise of comfort. If only I knew then that loneliness was 1,000 times safer than the shelter he was offering me. That first night in Dad's room was strange, but not in the way it would later become. He had me lie down on the bed that used to be theirs, Mom's and his, and he lay down on the other side, leaving a space between us. He smelled of bourbon and sweat, but also of the linseed oil he used on the woods. I stared at the ceiling, at the same spot Mom must have looked at so many times. "You know, honey," he said in the dark, "sometimes God takes what we love most from us to see if we still know how to love." I didn't answer. I was thinking about Mom, if she could see us from where she was, if she knew how much we were suffering without her. "Now it's just the 3 of us," Dad continued. "We have to take care of each other." I slept fitfully, but I slept. When I woke up, Dad was already up and in the kitchen making coffee. The smell of brewed coffee was comforting, as if a little piece of our old routine was still there. Ethan arrived from Uncle Frank's house and looked at me strangely when he saw me coming out of Dad's room. He didn't say anything, but I saw his eyes narrow. I thought it would be just that one night, that it was a momentary comfort for 2 people in mourning. But the next night, as I was getting ready to sleep in my room, Dad appeared at the door. "Come on, honey," he said. "It's not good to be alone with your thoughts at your age." And so it began. One night turned into 2, 2 turned into a week, and soon there was no more invitation. It was simply where I slept now. Ethan continued to find it strange, but what could he say? He was our father, the man who provided for us, who took care of us now that Mom was gone. In the beginning, it was just lying side by side. Sometimes he would cry softly, thinking I was asleep. I felt sorry for him, for his pain, but I soon realized the drinking was changing something in him. He started coming home later and later from O'Malley's convenience store, staggering down the hallway, and in the dark of the room, his sobs of grief began to transform into something else. The first time I felt his hand on me, it was like a shock. I had just turned 11 years and 2 months old. I pretended to be asleep, breathing slowly and rhythmically, while my heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it. His hands were large and rough, calloused from working with hard woods. Hands I had once admired, watching them create beauty from rough logs. Now, in the dark, those same hands moved in a way I didn't completely understand. But that caused me a deep discomfort, a lump in my throat, a desire to run away. "It's just affection," he'd whisper, more to himself than to me. All fathers give their daughters affection. His hot, sour breath of bourbon reached me, and I shrank even more, faking a deep sleep while silent tears ran down my face and wet the pillow. The following mornings, he acted normally. He'd make coffee, give me money for bread, ask about school, as if nothing had happened. And at first, I almost believed I had dreamed it, that those affections were nightmares caused by the sadness of losing Mom. This is the mind's cruelest trick, making you doubt your own reality to protect you from a truth you cannot bear. But this was no nightmare, and the secret he was about to create would be the weapon he used to ensure her silence for years to come. But then, the night would come again. "Every family has a secret," he told me once, while his hands roamed places they should never have been. "This is our secret, Nomi. If you tell anyone, they'll take you and Ethan away. And then who will take care of you?" Fear paralyzed me. Fear of being separated from my brother. Fear of going to an unknown place. Fear that no one would believe me against the word of a respected adult in the community. And, God forgive me, fear of hurting my own father, who, despite everything, I still loved in some confused, painful way. Ethan started looking at me differently, not with anger, but with a sad confusion. He was nearly 14 by then, a teenager starting to understand things I still didn't fully grasp. One time, he tried to talk to me. "Nomi," he said softly while we were alone in the yard. "Why are you sleeping in Dad's room?" "I'm just scared to sleep alone," I replied, my eyes fixed on the packed dirt beneath my feet. "And him. Does he treat you okay in there?" His voice wavered a bit. I couldn't answer. I just shrugged. Ethan was silent for a long time, then said, "If he does anything at all that makes you sad or scared, you tell me, okay? Promise?" I promised, but it was an empty promise. How could I tell? How could I put into words something I didn't even understand myself? The months passed, and the situation got worse. The affections became more invasive, more painful, more frightening. I developed strategies. I'd pretend to be sick. I'd wait for him to drink until he passed out. I'd try to sleep in Ethan's room when Dad went out at night, but there was always a night when I couldn't escape. At school, my grades started to drop. I couldn't concentrate. I was tired all the time. The teacher, Miss Albright, noticed the change. "Naomi, is something going on at home?" she asked once after class. I shook my head no, but she didn't seem convinced. "You know you can talk to me, right? About anything." I almost told her that day. I almost let it all out. But then I remembered his words, our secret, and what would happen if I spoke. So I swallowed my tears and said I was just missing my mom. "I know what you might be thinking. You might blame Miss Albright. Why didn't she do more?" But I understand. Back then, people were terrified of interfering in family business. And the most important part, shaking her head, I was too terrified to speak. A child's word. How could it ever stand against that of a respected man? I stopped playing with Hannah and Emily. They would call for me from the street, but I'd hide in my room, pretending not to hear. How could I play house when my own house had become a prison? How could I share secrets when my one terrible secret was eating me alive? They eventually stopped calling. The silence from their side of the street was almost as painful as the sounds inside my own home. I was an island, and the water was rising. Time passed differently at night. The minutes dragged on as I waited for him to fall asleep. I learned to recognize his heavy breathing when the alcohol finally overcame him. Only then could I relax a little, curled up on the edge of the bed, as far away from him as possible. I started to hate myself, to hate my body, which was beginning to change, to hate the mirror, which showed me a girl I no longer recognized. I started wearing baggy clothes, hiding inside them. I stopped playing with my friends, stopped going to school parties. Any touch, even an innocent one, scared me. But the worst part wasn't the nights. The worst part was how it was changing the way I saw the world. When I watched other families in the town square on Sundays, I would wonder, Are there secrets hidden there too? Does that father smiling at his daughter as he pushes her on the swing also transform at night? It was on one of those Sunday afternoons, almost a year after it all began, that I had a kind of revelation. We were at the town square as usual, but now it was different. Dad didn't buy us ice cream cones anymore. He was always irritated or distant. Ethan was barely home anymore, spending more and more time at Uncle Frank's house. And I was sitting there on a bench, watching people. I saw a father with his daughter. She must have been about my age, maybe 12. He hugged her, playfully messed up her hair, and put her on his shoulders so she could see something happening on the other side of the square. And in her eyes, instead of fear, there was pure joy, total trust. It was as if a curtain had been torn away in front of me. Suddenly, I saw clearly. What was happening to me wasn't normal. It wasn't affection. It wasn't a father's love. It was something else. Something dirty, wrong, that was destroying me from the inside out every night. A father's true love looked like what I was seeing now. Protection, respect, shared joy. And in that moment, something changed inside me. The confusion gave way to a painful certainty. Fear began to share space with another feeling. Anger. That is the moment the victim begins to transform. Anger is a powerful, clarifying fuel. It's the first seed of survival. But for a 2-year-old girl trapped in that house, what good is anger without power? Keep listening, because what she does with this newfound clarity will define everything. Do you see? That was the moment the truth simply shattered that wall of fear. It was only by seeing what true love looked like that I finally understood the hell I was living in. Sometimes, my dears, anger is the very first seed of courage. A deep anger that burned slowly, like the embers in my father's workshop when he forged his metal pieces. An anger that would gradually transform into something even more dangerous. Determination. That night, when he came home drunk and his large, calloused hands began to move in the dark, I didn't close my eyes. For the first time, I looked directly at him. He didn't notice. He was too drunk. But I noticed something. He was no longer an invincible giant in my eyes. He was just a weak man, broken by pain, seeking comfort in the worst way possible. And for the first time, I didn't just feel fear. I also felt pity. And the pity, mixed with the anger, began to give me strength. One day, I thought as he finally fell into a drunken sleep, one day this will end. I didn't know how yet or when, but the seed was planted. I was only 12, but in that moment, something adult and dangerous began to grow inside me. Something that would wait patiently for the right time. The next year was a nightmare that seemed to have no end. The more time passed, the bolder and more careless Dad became. What used to happen only in the dark of night, protected by the secret of the bedroom, began to happen at other times when Ethan wasn't home. In the kitchen, while I washed the dishes. In the dark hallway, when I came back from the bathroom, the large, rough hand always found a way to reach me, to trap me, to hurt me. The alcohol made everything worse. It wasn't just on weekends anymore. Now he started drinking right after lunch. The orders at the carpentry shop dropped even more. Clients complained about poorly finished furniture, missed deadlines. Our financial situation became critical. Sometimes there wasn't food on the table. Ethan, then 15, started working with Uncle Frank on the farm to bring some money home. By this time, Ethan already suspected that something very wrong was happening. He watched me with a sad, helpless look. Once he walked into the room while Dad was giving me affection, as he called it. It was a terrible moment. Dad jumped up, staggering, and yelled for Ethan to get out. The two argued fiercely, and for a moment, I thought they were going to hit each other. Ethan had grown, but Dad was still stronger. In the end, Ethan left, slamming the door, and I heard him slam the front door too. He didn't come home for 2 days. When he returned, he tried to convince me to go with him to Uncle Frank's house. "We can run away, Nomi," he said, his eyes burning with determination. "Uncle Frank will understand when I tell him. He can help us." But fear paralyzed me. "What if he doesn't believe you?" I asked. "What if Dad comes looking for us? What if they separate us? What if?" I couldn't finish. Ethan hugged me, and I felt his thin body trembling against mine. He was scared, too. He was just a boy trying to protect his little sister. Then I'll save money, he decided. I'll work more, save everything, and when I have enough, we'll go to Louisville. I have a friend who went there, said there's work. I'll get you out of here, Nomi, I promise. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to so badly. But the nights continued, relentless, and with them, the affections that made me sick inside. It was around this time that people in town started talking. Small towns have eyes everywhere, and the neighbors noticed the changes. They noticed I didn't smile anymore, that I always walked looking at the ground. They noticed Dad drank more and more, that Ethan always had dark circles under his eyes, always working to make up for what Dad no longer did. Miss Albright called me in after class again. Naomi, she said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder, a touch that made me flinch instinctively. I'm very worried about you. I know you lost your mother, that it's been hard, but there's something else going on, isn't there? You can trust me. I almost told her everything that day. Her eyes were so kind, so sincere. But then I thought of Ethan, of our plan to save money and run away. If I spoke, maybe everything would get even worse. Maybe they wouldn't even believe me. So, I just cried without saying anything, and she hugged me in silence. At home, things hit rock bottom in the winter of my 13th year. Dad completely lost control. The workshop was practically abandoned. He spent his days at the store drinking and came home at night, out of his mind. Sometimes he couldn't even make it to his room. He'd pass out in the living room. Those were the only nights I could sleep in peace. Ethan, desperate, worked more and more, taking on the role of the provider. He was only 15, but he already looked like an adult, with a thin face and always tired eyes. Our relationship became strange, tense. He wanted to protect me, but he couldn't always be there. And when he wasn't, Dad took advantage. One night, Ethan came home earlier than expected. Dad was in the kitchen, pressing me against the sink, his hands going under my shirt while I cried silently. Ethan saw everything. What happened next was a blur. I remember screams, furniture being knocked over. I remember Ethan, my skinny 5-year-old brother, jumping on our father, trying to hit him. And I remember the sound of something breaking a bottle, and the blood. So much blood. Dad had broken a bourbon bottle over Ethan's head. My brother fell, bleeding heavily. I ran to him, screaming. But Dad pulled me by the arm, with so much force I thought it would break. He tried to kill me, Dad yelled. I'm calling the police. I'll have that bastard arrested. In that moment, something inside me broke. It wasn't just fear or anger. It was pure hatred. A hatred I had never felt before. If you call the police, I said, my voice strangely calm, I'll tell them everything you do to me. He stared at me, his eyes red and swollen, his beard unshaven, the smell of alcohol permeating everything. For a moment, I saw fear in his eyes. Fear of a 3-year-old girl, and that gave me a power I had never felt before. Ethan needed stitches in his head. We made up a story for the doctor, that he had fallen and hit his head on the corner of the table. No one completely believed it, but no one questioned it much either. That's how things worked in small towns back then. After that, Ethan was never the same. Something had broken inside him, too. 2 weeks later, he packed his few belongings and left home. I know it's hard to understand. How could he leave his sister? A slight pause. But Ethan, he was just a boy himself. Just 15. He tried. He fought for me. And he lost that fight. He didn't leave to abandon me. He left to try and build a future, a path to survival, for both of us. I'm going to Louisville, he told me as he packed a small bag. I'll work, rent a room, and then I'll come back for you. I promise, Nomi. I won't leave you here forever. I cried so much that day. I begged him to take me with him, but he explained it would be harder to get work and housing with a 3-year-old girl. I need to get established first, he said. It'll just be for a little while. I promise. And so, I was left alone with Dad. Without Ethan's protective presence, without anyone to intervene, things got even worse. The affections became more violent, more frequent. There was no one else in the house to interrupt us, no one to scream to for help. I learned to detach myself during those moments. to send my mind far away while my body remained trapped there. I imagined I was in the town square eating an ice cream cone with Mom and Ethan, or at the river, where we used to fish in the summers before everything fell apart. I created entire worlds inside my head, where I was safe, protected, loved in the right way. But reality always returned, and with it, the pain, the shame, the feeling of being completely alone in the world. The weeks turned into a month, then 2, with no news from Ethan. I began to fear he had forgotten me, that he had moved on with his life and left me behind. Or worse, that something bad had happened to him. Louisville was a big, dangerous city for a boy from the country. Then, one rainy afternoon, as I was coming home from school, I saw an envelope under the door. Inside was money. Not much, but more than I had ever seen all at once. And a note. I'm working in a factory. I have a room rented. It's not safe to get you yet, but it will be soon. Hang in there. Love you. E. That note gave me the strength to endure. I knew I just had to hang on a little longer. I hid the money in a spot I made under a loose floorboard in my old room. I started planning my escape, calculating how much I'd need for a bus ticket, how long it would take to get to Louisville, how I'd find Ethan when I got there. But fate had other plans. One night, Dad came home more drunk than usual. He was furious, yelling about some job that had gone wrong, some client who refused to pay. I tried to hide in the bathroom, but he broke down the door. It's all your fault, he yelled, though it made no sense. You and your brother, you ruined my life. What happened next was a slow-motion nightmare. He dragged me to the room, tore my clothes. His hands, those large, calloused hands that had once built beautiful things, were now only used to destroy. They tore away my childhood, my innocence, my future. I tried to resist. For the first time, I really fought back. I scratched, I kicked, I tried to scream, but he was so much stronger, and the alcohol seemed to make him immune to pain. When it was finally over, he fell into a deep sleep, snoring loudly, as if nothing had happened. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, at the same spot Mom must have looked at so many times. And that's when I made my decision. I wouldn't wait for Ethan anymore. I couldn't stand another day in that house. Somehow, this had to end. And if no one was going to save me, I would have to save myself. That is the sound of a spirit hitting rock bottom and pushing off, hard. The fear is still there, but something new and cold has taken over. Determination. A 3-year-old girl, pushed past the brink, now has a plan, and you will not believe what she is capable of next. With that thought, I fell asleep. A troubled sleep, filled with nightmares. But when I woke up the next morning, something had changed. I was no longer just a scared girl. I was a survivor with a plan. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something like hope. The morning after that terrible night, Dad left early. He didn't even look me in the eye during breakfast, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't destroyed another piece of me the night before. His face was swollen, his eyes red, his hands trembling as he held his coffee cup. I'm going to work in the shop today, he mumbled. I have a cabinet to deliver to Mr. Henderson by the end of the week. I nodded silently. I no longer cared about his plans, about his empty promises of work that rarely materialized. I just wanted him to leave, to let me breathe for a few hours. When I heard the workshop door close, I went to my hiding spot and took the money Ethan had sent. I counted the bills several times. Would it be enough for a ticket to Louisville? And how would I find my brother in such a big city? The note had no address, no indication of where he was. Fear paralyzed me again. I looked out the window and saw Dad walking toward the store, probably to buy bourbon before starting work. His gait was already unsteady, even at that hour of the morning. Suddenly, I had a terrifying certainty. He would never change. This would continue, night after night, until when? Until I managed to escape? Until he killed me in one of his rages? Until I killed myself to escape that hell? It was then that I heard my mother's voice, as clear as if she were next to me. Be strong, my daughter. Do what needs to be done. It wasn't really her voice, of course. It was my mind, drawing strength from wherever it could. but it gave me a clarity I hadn't had before. I couldn't wait for someone to save me. Not Ethan, not Miss Albright, not the neighbors who pretended not to see what was happening in our house. I had to save myself. I spent the whole day prowling the house, restless, thinking about what to do. Would I run away tonight? Try to get to the bus station without being seen? Take the first bus far away from here? But where would I go if I couldn't find Ethan in Louisville? As these questions swirled in my head, my feet led me to the workshop in the back of the house. It was empty. Dad had probably gone to the store and wouldn't be back for a while. I entered slowly, breathing in the familiar smell of wood, varnish, and linseed oil. This was his kingdom, the place where he transformed from a violent drunk into a respected craftsman. The tools were scattered on the workbench: hammers, chisels, saws, sandpaper. And in the back, covered by a thin layer of sawdust, was the bandsaw, a big old machine Dad had bought secondhand from a workshop that closed down in Owensboro. His pride and joy. The bandsaw was silent now, but I knew the sound it made when it was on. A high-pitched whine that became a roar when the blade cut through the wood. I had seen Dad use it hundreds of times, always with care, always respecting the machine's power. "This thing will cut through anything, Nomi," he explained to me once, back when he was still a real father. "That's why you have to respect it. Never mess with it when I'm not around." I looked at the machine for a long time. Something was forming in my mind, something dark and definitive. This is the hardest part to tell. This old woman isn't proud of what came next, but I need you to understand. When any person, especially a child, is backed into a corner for that long, the line between right and wrong, between light and darkness, it just blurs. All that's left is one single thought. How do I make it stop? It wasn't quite a plan yet, but a glimpse of a possibility. Terrifying, but also liberating. When I went back to the house, Dad had returned. He was in the living room, a half-empty bottle beside him, snoring on the old sofa. I looked at him and felt nothing. Not fear, not anger, not hatred. Just a cold, clear certainty. I couldn't run away without a plan. I needed to be sure. I needed to study his habits, to understand exactly how the bandsaw worked, how he turned it on, how he turned it off. I needed to be sure. I spent the next week observing. I went to school, came home, did what he said, endured the nights, but now, with a purpose. Every detail was important. I found out that every Saturday, he drank more than usual. That on Saturday afternoons, when he came back from the store, he'd go straight to the workshop, determined to prove to himself that he could still work. I found out that when he drank too much, he became clumsy, reckless with the tools. He had already cut himself several times, small accidents he hid with dirty bandages. And most importantly, I found out that he never used the safety switch on the bandsaw. Waste of time. He'd grumble when anyone mentioned the danger. I know this machine like the back of my hand. On Saturday, I woke up with a strange calm, as if my body knew this would be the last day of fear, the last day of pain. I made breakfast in silence. I served Dad, who already seemed half drunk even at that hour. "I'm going to work on Henderson's cabinet today," he said, more to himself than to me. "Gonna finish it today for sure." "Yes, Dad," I replied, my voice neutral. He looked at me, surprised. It had been a long time since I had responded, since I had reacted. Maybe he mistook my calm for submission, for acceptance. Maybe he thought he had finally broken me completely. He left for the store as always. I waited. An hour. 2. When the clock struck 3 p.m., I heard the front door, heavy, dragging footsteps, a curse as he tripped on the rug. Then, the back door opening and closing. He had gone to the workshop. I waited another half hour. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clearer than ever. Slowly, I got up and went to the kitchen. I got a glass of water, drank it slowly. Then I walked to the back door, crossed the small yard, and stopped at the workshop entrance. He was there, his back to me, hunched over the bandsaw, adjusting something. The bourbon bottle was next to him, already half empty. the strong smell of alcohol mixed with that of freshly cut wood. His large, skilled hands, despite his drunkenness, moved with a familiarity born from decades of practice. I entered silently. He didn't hear me. The old radio was playing some country music, muffling my footsteps. I got closer, watching. His hands were inside the machine now, adjusting the tension of the blade. The saw was off, but the safety switch, the one that should always be locked during adjustments, was in the on position, as always. The power switch was on the right side of the machine, a big, round, red button. All it took was one push for the saw to spring to life. I stood there, watching his hands inside the machine, those hands that had taken my childhood, my innocence, my peace. Those hands that only brought pain and shame, large, rough, calloused from working with wood and stained by years of alcohol. "Naomi," his voice surprised me. He had turned and seen me standing there. "What are you doing here, girl? I told you not to come in the workshop when I'm working." I didn't answer. I just took a step to the side, moving closer to the power switch. "You hear me? Get out of here. Go make dinner." He took a step towards me, and the grin returned, pulling at his lips. It was a wet, knowing grin that chilled me to the bone. "And after," he whispered, his voice thick with bourbon and that terrible promise, "we'll have our special time, won't we? Just like last night." He reached out his hand, not the one in the machine, but his free one, and grabbed my wrist. It was the touch, the same rough, calloused hand that had hurt me just hours before, the same grip that held me down in the dark. In that moment, everything broke. The plan, the fear, the years of silence, all of it exploded in a single, silent scream inside my head. I didn't think. I just reacted. My other hand, my free hand, flew to the side of the machine. My small fingers found the big red button, and I pushed. The sound of the saw roaring to life was deafening in the small space, the roar of the blade spinning at high speed. And then another sound, a sound I will never forget as long as I live, his scream. It wasn't a scream of anger. It wasn't like the screams I was used to hearing when he was drunk and furious. It was a scream of pure pain, of shock, of disbelief, a scream that started low and ended in a high-pitched shriek that didn't sound human. The machine roared. His scream mixed with it, a sound that didn't seem human. I didn't wait to see the result. I turned and ran out of the workshop, screaming. I ran into the yard, screaming for help, screaming until my throat was raw. The saw was still running in the background, a terrible, high-pitched whine. In that moment, something strange happened to me. It was like I was watching the scene from outside my body. I saw myself, a small girl screaming in the yard. I saw the neighbors come running. Mrs. Davis from next door was the first. She saw me, then looked past me at the workshop, heard the saw, and her face went white. She ran inside, and a moment later, the terrible whining of the saw finally stopped. Then other people came, someone called an ambulance, and they led me away, saying, "The poor thing, she saw everything. Get her out of here." And the whole time, a voice inside my head repeated calmly, "It's over. It's terrifying, isn't it? That scream. And then that calm in my own head. That's what happens when the mind rips itself from the body, just to protect itself. I wasn't Naomi in that moment. I was just something that had finally broken out of its cage. My first feeling wasn't guilt. It was relief. It's finally over. The days following the accident passed in a fever dream. The police and paramedics arrived, the sirens blending with the sound of the dripping. Mrs. Davis, our neighbor, pulled me away from the door, wrapping me in a blanket, her face pale with shock. "The poor thing. She saw everything," I heard someone say. I wasn't allowed to stay at the house. A police officer drove me to the hospital, but I was taken to a different area, a small, quiet room for families. A woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice sat with me. She said her name was Miss Gable, and she was a social worker. She asked me what happened, but not like an interrogation. She just listened. I repeated the story I had practiced in my head. "It was an accident," I whispered, my voice trembling. "He was drunk. He never used the safety switch." I just found him like that. Even when I was safe, I still didn't dare tell the truth. You see, when you've lived in hell for that long, you don't know how to act in a safe place. I was terrified they wouldn't believe me. Terrified they'd send me back. That kind of fear. It doesn't just vanish overnight. I don't know if she believed me, but she looked at me with a profound sadness. She asked about Ethan. She asked about school. She asked if I felt safe at home. I just stared at my hands, unable to answer. I never saw my father in that hospital. Miss Gable told me his injuries were severe. He's had surgery, she explained calmly. The doctors say he will never have the use of his hands again, not for carpentry. I just nodded, feeling nothing. Naomi, she said, placing a gentle hand on my arm. We've been trying to locate your brother, Ethan. We finally found him in Louisville. He's on his way. He'll be here tomorrow morning. You're going to stay with Mrs. Davis tonight, and tomorrow. We'll all talk with Ethan. You won't be alone anymore. Those words lit a small flame of hope inside me. Ethan was coming back. I wouldn't be alone anymore. I spent the night at Mrs. Davis's house, our neighbor. I couldn't sleep, thinking about what I would say to Ethan when I saw him. Would I tell him the truth, the whole truth? Or would I keep that last secret just for myself? When the sun came up, I was already on my feet, waiting anxiously. Around 9 a.m., a car pulled up in front of Mrs. Davis's house. The door opened, and there he was. My brother. My protector. He looked older, thinner, more serious. But when he saw me, his face lit up with the same old smile. I ran into his arms and just fell apart. All the control, all the coldness I had maintained during those days dissolved in a torrent of tears. He held me tight, as if trying to make up for all the time we were apart. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. Safety. Protection. A breath she hasn't been able to take in years. She is finally free from that house. But she is not yet free from what happened in it. The physical cage is gone, but the battle for her mind is just beginning. I should have taken you with me, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Forgive me, Nomi. Forgive me for leaving you alone with him. You came back, I managed to say between sobs. That's all that matters. Ethan went to see our father at the hospital. I waited in the car, unable to set foot in that building again. When he came back, his face was grim, his lips pressed into a thin line. He won't be coming home for a long time, he said, starting the car. And when he does, we won't be there. What do you mean? I'm taking you with me to Louisville. Today, I have a steady job at a factory, a rented room. It's not much, but it's far away from him. And when he's discharged, he's going to need care. The doctors already said they're sending him to a rehab clinic for alcoholics after the hospital. It looks like Uncle Frank is going to help with that. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I breathed without that constant feeling of fear and depression. I was free, finally free. Are you sure we can just go? I asked, still in disbelief. The social worker already approved it. I'm your brother. I'm 15, but I have a steady job. With the state he's in, no one is going to question you staying with me. And if they try to send you back or to some shelter, we'll run away. I swear, Nomi, I will never let anyone hurt you again. We went back to our house to grab a few things. It was strange being there without his threatening presence. I went into my old room, looked at the window that faced the yard, at the walls with the faded floral wallpaper. I grabbed some clothes, a picture of our mother, the money I had hidden. I didn't want anything else from that place. The workshop was padlocked, with yellow police tape across the door. Accident scene, it said. I looked one last time at that place where my life had changed forever, and I felt no remorse, only relief. The trip to Louisville was long. We took a bus that left at noon and only arrived at night. I looked out the window, watching the landscape change, the small towns giving way to open fields, and then the fields giving way to taller and taller buildings as we approached the city. It's big, isn't it? Ethan said, noticing my amazement when we finally arrived. It scared me the first time, too. But you'll get used to it. And here, nobody knows us. We can start over. The room Ethan rented was in a boarding house in the Portland neighborhood, near the factory where he worked. It was small, with just a single bed, a small table, and a wardrobe. "I'll sleep on the floor," he said, laying out a thin mattress he had borrowed. "Tomorrow, I'll start looking for a bigger place for us." That first night in Louisville, lying in bed while Ethan slept on the floor, I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to the strange sounds of the big city. Cars, horns, distant voices, so different from the oppressive silence of the nights in Paducah. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the dark. The following months were an adjustment. Ethan kept working at the furniture factory, using the skills he had learned from our father for something positive. I started at a public school near the boarding house. It was hard at first. I barely spoke. I was afraid of everyone. I'd get startled if someone raised their voice or made a sudden move near me. But slowly, very slowly, I started to open up. I made a friend, Ashley, a girl with thick glasses who was also new at school and just as shy as I was. I started getting good grades, participating more in class. The English teacher, Mrs. Clark, said I had a talent for writing, that I should develop it. Ethan found a small apartment for us to rent in the Highlands neighborhood. Just one bedroom, a tiny living room, and a kitchen, but it was ours. Our safe space, far away from him. Sometimes I'd get news about our father through Uncle Frank, who called every once in a while. I learned he had gotten out of the hospital after 3 months, that he had lost most of the mobility in his hands, that he could never work as a carpenter again, that he was in the rehab clinic trying to quit drinking, that he asked about us. I listened to it all in silence, without reaction. One day, almost a year after the accident, Ethan brought me a letter from him. "You don't have to read it if you don't want to," my brother said, "but I thought I should give it to you." I held the letter in my hand for hours, unable to open it. When I finally did, I found shaky, uneven handwriting, the writing of someone who can barely hold a pen. It was an apology, long, rambling, full of justifications about the alcohol, about the pain of losing our mother, about how he wasn't in his right mind. He said that in the clinic, he had understood the harm he had done, that he would never drink again, that he wanted to see us, that we could be a family again. At the end, he wrote, "I know what I did is unforgivable, but I need to say this. That accident. I remember you there. I remember the look in your eyes. And as terrible as it was, I think it saved our lives. You had the courage I didn't have to break that cycle. I read that last line over and over. You had the courage." He was looking to me, his victim, for his own absolution. He was trying to reframe what I did as some kind of shared salvation. I held that letter for a long time, the paper shaking in my hand. A part of me, the little girl who just wanted her dad back, felt a strange pull. But the young woman who had survived knew better. His courage was a convenient story he told himself in that clinic. My courage was a 13-year-old girl fighting for her life. They were not the same. I didn't need his permission to be free. I didn't need his version of the story. Slowly, I tore the letter into tiny pieces and let them fall into the trash. This, right here, is her true and final liberation. She's not just tearing up a letter. She's tearing up the last shred of power he held over her. Her healing, she decides, will be on her terms. How does a survivor, forged in such darkness, finally learn to build a life, to trust, and to love? Her story of recovery is one you need to hear. I wasn't tearing up his words. I was tearing up the last shred of power he held over me. My healing would not come from him. It would have to come from me. He was looking for my forgiveness, so he could have peace. But that forgiveness wasn't mine to give. A deep breath. Tearing up that letter. That was the final act of my liberation. My healing had to be on my terms. It belonged to me, not to him. My life was in Louisville now, with Ethan, with the possibility of a different future. In escaping at 13, I had begun my real life one where I wouldn't have to be afraid of anyone's hands. It wasn't easy. There were nightmares, anxiety attacks, moments when something as simple as the smell of alcohol or the sound of a saw would send me into a panic. But there was also Ethan, always by my side. There was Ashley and her unconditional friendship, even without knowing my whole story. There was Mrs. Clark, encouraging my writing, showing me I could transform pain into something beautiful through words. And there was me, stronger than I ever imagined I could be. A survivor. Someone who had the courage to do what needed to be done to break free. Today, at 73, sitting on my porch in Bowling Green, I see how much life can change. Who would have thought that scared girl from Paducah would one day be here, serene, surrounded by love and peace? The road was long. From Louisville, I ended up here because of love. I met my Walter when I was 23. He worked as an accountant at the same factory where Ethan was still employed. It was Ethan who introduced us at a company Christmas party. Walter was 10 years older than me, already established in life, with a calm and patience that won me over slowly. It was difficult at first. I still carried the scars of the past. I was still afraid of men. I still woke up screaming in the middle of the night. But Walter never gave up on me. He waited, patiently, as only he knew how. When I finally told him my whole story, he just held my hands and said, "You are the strongest person I have ever met." We got married in 1975. I was 25 and he was 35. It was a small ceremony, just with our closest friends. Ethan was my man of honor. He was already married to Rachel, whom he met in college. Yes, my brother managed to go to school, became an engineer. He was always the smart one in the family. Today they live in Atlanta. They have 2 grown children. We talk on the phone every week. Walter was from Bowling Green and brought me here after the wedding. I fell in love with this city from the first day. There's something in the atmosphere here, in the way people are, that made me feel at home in a way I never had before. We bought our little house, small but comfortable, with a garden in the back, where Walter planted a little bit of everything. I worked as a secretary at a school for many years, while Walter continued in accounting. We didn't have children right away. The doctors said the trauma I lived through in my teens had left marks on my body as well, besides the ones I carried in my soul. But after 7 years of trying, our Sarah was born, bringing a joy I never imagined possible. Sarah was a blessing from her first cry. A healthy, strong girl, with her father's eyes and, they say, my smile. I raised her with all the love I didn't have at her age. I protected her like a lioness. Sometimes Walter would say I was too overprotective, but how could I be any different? I knew what the world was capable of. My Walter passed away 12 years ago. A massive heart attack. He was in the garden, tending to the rose bushes he loved so much, when he just collapsed. It was hard, very hard. But I had our Sarah, I had our granddaughter Mia, who was only 5 at the time. I had a life built with so much effort to keep going. Mia, my sweet girl. Today she's 17. Imagine that, a beautiful, smart young woman, full of dreams. She was the one who encouraged me to start these videos, saying my stories could help other people. At first, I thought it was crazy, but she insisted so much that I finally gave in. "Grandma, you survived so much. Your story needs to be told," she'd say. And it seems she was right, given the affection I receive from you all with every video. My routine today is peaceful. I wake up early, make my tea, tend to my plants. 3 times a week, I go to the church craft group, where I make crochet and knitting items for charity. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I volunteer as an adult literacy tutor at the community center. It's my way of giving back what Mrs. Clark did for me all those years ago, showing me that words can heal. Sarah comes to visit often. She lives only 20 minutes from here. Mia, well, she shows up almost every day after school. She sits here with me on the porch, tells me the news, teaches me how to use this complicated cell phone. She laughs at my trouble with technology. As for my father, he died many years ago in that rehab clinic. I never saw him again after that day in the hospital. I heard from Ethan that he never drank again after the accident, that he became a quiet, remorseful man, that his hands never fully recovered. They became like stiff claws, unable to even hold a glass properly. For a long time, I carried the weight of what I did in that workshop. It wasn't regret. It was more of a silent guilt that followed me. For decades, Ethan was the only one who knew the whole truth. And he never judged me. "You did what you had to do," he'd say whenever the subject came up. "He destroyed our childhood. You secured our future." With time, I learned to forgive myself. It wasn't easy. It took years of therapy. Yes, when I finally had the means, I sought professional help. Dr. Hayes, my psychologist for over a decade, helped me understand that the 3-year-old girl was fighting for her life in the only way she knew how. Today, when I look back, I see not only the pain and horror of those years, but also the strength I discovered within myself. The ability to survive, to rebuild, to love, despite everything. My house now is my refuge. Every corner has a piece of my story. The rocking chair Walter gave me on our 30th wedding anniversary, family photos on the walls, Sarah as a little girl on her father's lap, Mia on her first day of school, Ethan and me as adults, arm in arm, smiling sincerely after so much struggle, the colorful crochet items I make scattered on the furniture, the garden I keep in bloom all year, even in winter. This is the life I built from the ashes of a past that tried to destroy me. A simple life, but full of meaning. A life where the hands that touch me only bring true affection. Where the night is no longer a source of terror, but of deserved rest. And that's what I'm most proud of. Not just of having survived, but of having learned to live fully, in spite of it all. For many years after, I wondered if I was any different from him. We both used violence to solve our pain. He used it to destroy, and I used it to escape. It took decades of therapy, and a lifetime of love with Walter, for me to understand. That poor 3-year-old girl was fighting for her life. My father lost everything in that workshop. I, on the other hand, found everything after I had the courage to walk away from it. Today, this garden is my workshop. These 3-year-old hands, instead of flipping a deadly switch, now sew life, knit warm scarves for my granddaughter, and write these stories for you. I am no longer a victim of those calloused hands. I am the creator of my own destiny. My story is a reminder that even from the ashes of the past, we can build a meaningful life. If you believe in the power of survival and want to hear more stories of human resilience, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you for being here and for listening.